Yeah, I know. It's a new pair of glasses, right? Totally unpredictable, wild and crazy in here. Yeah. Hi BookTube, it's Kim at K. Becker's Books, and today I wanted to bring you my top 10 reads of 2019. This is a great list because in 2019 I read 106 books, and I was fortunate enough to read 15 five-star books. I rate them on Goodreads, and that's kind of what I'm going to be going by for my rating system. I have 10 books that I have pulled out of the 15 that I'm going to present as my top 10. Then I have 4 honorable mentions which were also 5-star reads, but they didn't get into the top 10, but I still love the books. And there's one 5-star read that I'm not including in this list, but will be in another video coming up next, and you'll understand why. So stay tuned for that one. I'll give you more information at the end of the video. So let's get started on my 5-star reads for the year. I'm going to start with the 4 honorable mentions. The first one, and again, I'm not going to say a lot about each book until I get to probably the top 3. We'll see how it goes. The first honorable mention is Speak. This is by Laurie Halse Anderson. It is a middle grade, high school grade book talking about the sexual assault of a high school freshman during a end of summer party. I talked about this already. It's a phenomenal book for young people to read of either or any gender to learn and discuss in an applicable way sexual assault. The next one is, I also talked about this already, Brown Girl Dreaming from Jacqueline Woodson. This is a memoir. I think it's a memoir or a novel-based memoir written in verse and regarding Jacqueline's childhood in the 60s in the South and moving to New York City. It's very good, 5 stars. I really enjoyed it. The next one is, let's see, Rules of Civility by Amor Towles. I read A Gentleman in Moscow, absolutely loved it a couple of years ago. That was a 5-star read in the year I read it. This one is set in the 20s and 30s in New York City, and I just really enjoyed reading of that time period and this group of friends that, not their escapades, but their lives with each other, their friendships, their relationships. I think I actually gave this 4.5 stars, but I wanted to include it in this list. Really enjoyed that one. And let's see. Okay, yeah. The next one, this is another honorable mention. This is Ordinary People by Judith Guest, and this is, I believe, her first novel. It is the story of a family in the 70s who just lost a beloved older son to an accident, a drowning accident. And it's the aftermath of how that family copes with that situation. The son, the younger son that is left over, who is treated as a leftover child by his mother, and who eventually becomes suicidal and ends up in a psychological hospital. Exceptionally well-written family dysfunction. It was written a while ago, and yes, the movie is based on this, the Mary Tyler Moore and Timothy Hutton movie. The movie is quite dated, but the book is not, and phenomenal writing about a dysfunctional family dealing with trauma. Okay, where am I going now? Now I'm going to get into the top 10, and until I get to the top 2, all of these books I rated 5 stars on Goodreads, and I put them in order of, not least favorite, but the top 3 or 4 are my absolute favorites. And these other books I loved reading throughout the year. This one is Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. The nature writing in this book is absolutely beautiful. And she is a nature writer and biologist, I believe, by trade. This is the story of Kaya, who grows up in the swamps after she's abandoned by her entire family. She has an alcoholic, abusive, dysfunctional father. Her mother has abandoned all of the children with him. And each child older than her eventually leaves, and finally she's left alone with her father, who finally deserts her. So Delia Owens writes about her coming of age in the swamps, There's also a mystery built in and a love story. So this was a great read. Absolutely love the writing in this one. The next one I just read recently, and I'm going to give almost no description because everybody knows about this, but I finally read it, and it's Donna Tartt's The Goldfinch. This was a 5-star read. It's not a perfect book. There's a lot of criticism about the writing and about the content. And Donna Tartt is definitely an enigma of a writer. So it's almost polarizing. You either love it or you hate it. I happen to love it. I gave it 5 stars, really enjoyed it. I think I avoided it for so long because I did not want to take the risk of hating it. But I did not. I really loved it. The next one is I think she's becoming one of my favorite authors. This is Someone by Alice McDermott. And Alice McDermott writes books that I describe as quiet stories. This is the story of a woman growing up in New York, in Brooklyn, I believe. And it's her coming of age. She ends up working in a funeral home. She wants to get married and have a family. She has some sort of sight disorder that affects her forming relationships and her self-esteem, but in the end, she ends up doing exactly what her goals were, and it describes what her family becomes, who she becomes, and it's a story of a woman's quiet life, but how profound that actually is. I really love this book. The next one has been all over BookTube. Again, I'm not going to give too much description, but this is a phenomenal book, Miriam Toews' Women Talking. Miriam Toews came from a Mennonite background, and she's writing it based on a true story in a Mennonite community in Latin America, and I forget which country it is, of women and girls and children who were drugged and raped in their sleep by Mennonite men in their community. And it's a true story. Miriam Toews writes a fictional account of a group of women who discovered that they and their female children, one or two of whom were babies, who were drugged and sexually assaulted and raped. And this group of women meets in a barn with one man of their community who is taking the minutes of their meetings, trying to decide whether they should stay in the community once some of the men who have been arrested are being bailed out by some of the other men in the community. Should they stay in the community? Should they leave? Should they fight back? So it's an incredible reading experience, and Miriam Toews' writing is phenomenal. This was an excellent book, 5 stars on Goodreads. And then the last one in this lowest 5 of my top 10 is Jesmyn Ward's Sing Unburied Sing. Again, all over BookTube. I've talked about this one before. Really looking forward to reading the rest of or most of Jesmyn Ward's books. Okay, top 5 of my top 10. The first 2, I think I at least mentioned all of these books, but I loved my reading experience in 2019 because I read so many excellent books. I mean, 15 out of 106 books, that's over 10%, were 5-star reads, and I loved it. I loved the reading experience with a really good book, and it's so fulfilling to talk about those books and to put that book down and just sit and think about and realize how that made me feel. It's so satisfying and such an amazing payoff when you've read a 5-star book. This one, again, it's a quiet book. It's Kent Haruf's Our Souls at Night. This is the story of 2 neighbors who they're elderly, and they end up getting together solely through wanting to get rid of their loneliness, wanting to have connection and relationship. And Haruf writes their stories with such warmth and heart. Just, they took the step, and the actual woman of the pair is the one that makes the first step to say, you know what, I'm lonely, I'd like to spend time with you, let's do something about that. And he describes their relationship in such a profound and heartwarming way. Such a beautiful, short, spare story of love. The next one, again, I talked about this already, is Toni Morrison's Sula. This was a reread for me. I first read this years ago. I can't say anything about Toni Morrison that hasn't already been said. This is one of my favorite books. I think I haven't read a lot of Toni Morrison's newer books, but her older books are some of my all-time favorites that I've ever read. Here's my top 3. And the first one is the 5th season from N.K. Jemisin. This is a science fiction novel that I already talked about, that I brought this to my In Real Life book group, and I think it was one of only a couple of science fiction novels with those themes that we had ever read. Phenomenal. This is a very complex story. Jemisin is a phenomenal world. I keep saying phenomenal. I can't stand when I repeat words. But N.K. Jemisin is a tremendous world builder. And even though the story was very complex and detailed, she puts an appendix in the back of the book, and it helps so much in realizing the new language that she created, the new descriptions. And we absolutely love this book, and I ended up reading the trilogy. Interestingly enough, out of the trilogy, this first one was a 5-star, the second one was a 4-star, and the last one was a 3-star. Okay, my top 2 reads of the year. They could go in either order, so I just decided to put them in order of my reading experience. Both books are bound to be, one of them is already a classic, one of them is a contemporary novel, one is a classic, but I won't ever forget either of them. I've been thinking about these books since I put them down. The first one is the 2018 Man Booker winner, and that is Milkman from Anna Burns. Again, I talked about this already in one of my earlier videos. It depicts the troubles in Northern Ireland. Anna Burns writes in a stream of consciousness story format where she often goes off on tangents. I actually enjoyed that because it adds more depth into the characters and the story that she's writing at the time. None of the characters are named. The teenage narrator is living in a town in Northern Ireland that she doesn't feel she can escape. Milkman refers to the paramilitary officer who stalks her, basically wants her, whether she is open to that relationship or not. And it talks about what happens to this main character and her family and friends who are around her, and the situations that come up in living in this environment with a military action. The color of the novel, of the cover, the pink and the sunset, becomes important further on in the book. And if you get far enough, you realize why it's pink and orange and has a picture of a sunset on it, because it's set in Ireland, and stereotypically we expect to see something green on a book set in Northern Ireland. I read this. This was a very early 5-star book for me at the beginning of 2019. I have not been able to stop thinking about it. And the last one, the last 5-star, and my favorite, again, Milkman and this one are neck and neck. It could have gone either way, but because of the reading experience I had with this book, and I almost broke out into laughter when I was finished because I love this book so much. It is The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. I read this with a read-along with Dee Dee from Brown Girl Reading, and I think this 1,246-page Penguin classic is now, I think, one of my all-time favorite books. I think everybody knows the story of Edmond Dantes, who is unjustly and wrongly convicted and sent to a stone dungeon. He is there for 7 years. The book describes his escape/release and the sense of revenge that he has as he gets out. It's so complicated and complex with the amount of characters, but the story is so readable and the book was so accessible. Absolutely loved it. Loved the reading experience. I love being part of a group where we could talk about it as we read and talk about the stories and the characters. I probably will try to reread this someday in my lifetime. I don't often do that, but this is something I will never get rid of this book. I will never forget the story. And because it's so long, this is what happened to the spine. And I absolutely love the Black Penguin Classics paperbacks. But this one I know I'm breaking the spine's already broken, but this is one where I was determined to break the spine because it physically felt like I was sinking into the book and sinking into the story, and made it much more easy to read, to hold physically. So those are my best reads of 2019. Oh gosh, it was such a great reading year, and I just had the best time with all of these 5-star reads. The majority of the books I read in 2019 were 4-star reads, and there were so many of them. I just had a great time, and I hope you all had a wonderful reading year in 2019. I'm really looking forward to getting going in 2020. So thanks a lot for coming along with me. I hope some of these books were some of your favorites as well. Let me know in the comments if you've read them, read any of them, what you thought of them, if any of them were your 5-star reads, when you read them, if you've reread any of them, especially The Count of Monte Cristo. What does your opinion change when you read the same book from one year to the next? Write down a comment below, say hello, subscribe, and hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. And I really appreciate you being here. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a great 2020. Bye, everybody. Okay, you guys, I said at the beginning of the video that I was going to tell you more about what's coming up for my one 5-star read that I did not include in the list. And I'm preparing a worst reads of 2019. And that 5-star book is going to be in that video, comparing it to one of my most disappointing reads in 2019. So stay tuned. That video will come out in another couple of days, and hopefully it'll be a lot of fun for you to watch as I skewer a couple of the worst reads I've had in 2019. See you later. Bye.